Okay, so this is the Fishman FC-1 foot controller for the triple play wireless guitar system, which is basically a hex MIDI pickup that allows you, to convert your guitar playing into MIDI notes, wirelessly transmit those MIDI notes to this USB receiver, and then control either software instruments or hardware instruments, which is how I use it. And what's cool about the FC-1 is that rather than, require a laptop or computer that you plug this USB piece into, the FC-1 is a USB host that then converts to MIDI 5-pin DIN and gives you control over hardware MIDI gear. It does a couple of other things as well. If we look at this, it also has an expression pedal, a guitar in and a guitar out. Has a MIDI in, which frankly I don't really understand because there's not really anything in the manual about what this is for. And it doesn't really operate as a MIDI through, which is weird. So I haven't really figured that out. It would be cool if it were a MIDI through, but it isn't. The expression pedal is actually probably my favorite thing about this, beyond just the basic MIDI host thing. What you can do with that is set up an expression pedal, and then in the software, you can tell it which specific CC message you want the expression pedal to control. And so then, you could tie it to a parameter on any one of these synthesizers. I set it up to control the cutoff on this Korg synth so that I can play that essentially with my foot, which is pretty cool. The guitar in thing corresponds to the switching on the Fishman triple play itself, guitar mix synth switch. And if you look over here as I do that, you see the guitar and synth only. Now, one thing that is a limitation here that would be cool is if you could do that from the foot controller. In other words, if you could say, let me go to the guitar mode, let me go to the synth mode, let me go to the mix mode. There's 3 buttons here. You'd think that you'd be able to do that. You cannot. I've talked to Fishman about that, and they say maybe in an update or maybe in a new FC-1. So that's kind of a limitation. The other thing is this is not very well built. It's like plasticky compared to really all of these pedals, which are like nice aluminum metal chassis. It's the cheapest thing on this board. Just seems very breakable. The limitation I was just telling you about with the no ability to switch from the modes via the foot pedal kind of makes this a little bit of an overpriced deal in my opinion, because the main draw obviously is just this USB to MIDI host, and there are cheaper options for that if you just want that. I think you can buy little USB to 5-pin converters that will work with the Fishman system, and you don't have to spend as much for this thing with all of its supposed bells and whistles. The expression jack thing is cool though, as I was just explaining. So I think that that's an attraction to it. One other thing that I find to be kind of a limitation that should be at least a choice that you ought to be able to have that right now you don't have. Even in guitar only mode, the Fishman still sends, the wireless receiver still sends MIDI. It's received here and it's still sent out, even though you are in guitar only mode. So if you see that I'm playing the guitar, but the red light is lighting up here, to show MIDI is being sent. And if you go over to here, you'll see, again, MIDI is being received and sent back out of the sequencer. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's little arrows suggesting that MIDI data is being received and then sent out. That poses a problem in certain scenarios where the MIDI data is still being passed along, and you actually want it to be, quiet. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and so I've been in touch with Fishman about that, and it's basically the answer is, well, they made a strategic choice that you can't, that the MIDI doesn't just get cut off totally when you're in guitar only mode, because they wanted you, for example, to be able to hit like a sustaining synth pad, then switch over to your guitar and then keep that, droning synth MIDI notes, still playing, so you don't just truncate the pad. Okay, but it seems like you should be able to really do a MIDI mute so that you don't accidentally send some sort of CC or program change or whatever while you're playing. So that's basically the overview of this thing. I mean, I think it's close to being a really useful thing, but it's not quite there. And you really might be better served with just like a USB host, cheaper sort of alternative. There are more bells and whistles. I mean, you can change program changes on your synths, right? I mean, if I do this, then you don't know if you can see that up there, but it is cycling through patches on my hardware gear, but not necessary, because you can still do that right on the body of the Fishman itself. So I think that's basically my thoughts on this thing. One other follow-up to this, limitation of the whole system, not just the FC-1. It's the lack of an octave down or octave up button. Every single synthesizer that or MIDI keyboard, right? Octave. So you can set the octave range on this sequencer. You can set the octave range on this, Yamaha reface. You can set the octave range. I'm just going to do it one more time on the Juno. You can set the octave range on any MIDI keyboard. You can set the octave range. Why can't you do that in an intelligent, obvious way on the Fishman controller itself, or on the foot controller here? The system handles this in a very bizarre way. You have to go into the tuning of each program and transpose it, down 12 steps or whatever, so that you can get a low rumbling octave sound. And it just seems like one of these buttons on this ought to be a simple octave up, octave down, and the same here. You ought to be able to go into some mode and change the octave of your MIDI notes. You can't do that, and it is just mind-blowing to me that is not like an obvious thing that you can do. So that's another feature request for Fishman. But it just seems like it could be improved like significantly in a lot of different ways. And so those are my thoughts on it.